it was quite talk about it, but he used to tell us that he was 85 when he just hope that you enjoyed it and that you take away some of the social history of Dublin. I want to thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to Through Lucy's Lens. It's been a while since I've said that, isn't it? Welcome, I'm Lucy and I'll be your guide in today's video. I'm a social historian and I like to go to places that hopefully you'll find interesting too. I'm in Dublin. Why am I here? Because a subscriber said to me after I did my video about the tenement in Glasgow, did you know there was a tenement in Dublin? I did not, and I've obsessed about it ever since. So today I'm in Dublin. I've come here specifically to visit 14 Henrietta Street, and it's going to tell the history of 300 years of one building, from prosperity to poverty. Guided tour, I'm afraid, folks. Not sure how well I'm going to do, but as always, bear with me and I'll try and get the best that I can. So let's go. So welcome to Dublin, the capital city of the Republic of Ireland. And after soaking in some of the sights such as the Halfpenny Bridge and a walk down the River Liffey, we made our way to Henrietta Street. Dublin is a compact, friendly and easy to navigate city. And it's such a shame I didn't have longer to explore. But as usual, I was on a mission, as it often is when I'm on my filming trips, and I'm sure I'll return one day. Today I want to take you inside 14 Henrietta Street in Dublin, a building that has lived many different lives. It's a story about people and place. Like many historic houses, it reflects the changing fortunes of a city, moving from prosperity and elegance to a crowded tenement, and eventually becoming a space where those stories are remembered. The museum itself states, 14 Henrietta Street is a social history museum of Dublin life. We connect the history of urban life over 300 years to the stories of the people who called this place home. Henrietta Street itself began as one of Dublin's most fashionable and beautiful Georgian addresses. Developed in the early 18th century, it was designed to impress, with wide proportions, grand facades, and houses built for the city's wealthiest residents. When number 14 was completed in the late 1740s, it would have felt modern, confident, and full of possibility. Tall sash windows filled the rooms with light, and a sweeping grand staircase once connected the floors. The doors were wide enough to accommodate the large side hoops of the ladies' skirts. This was a carefully planned display of status, and these houses were places to be seen and were lived in for the Irish parliamentary season, and then locked up for the rest of the time when the residents would retreat to their large country estates. Early occupants of this house included members of Dublin's social elite, and the house has been home to no less than 6 titled residents: 2 army generals, 3 archbishops, 2 speakers of the House of Commons, and the Lord Chancellor of Ireland. Among them, Lord Richard Molesworth and his family lived here. Houses like this were as much about performance as they were comfort. The grand rooms were used for entertaining guests, holding conversations, and presenting a certain image of prosperity. Upstairs, family life continued more privately, while servants moved quietly through the back spaces, keeping the household running. But cities never stay the same. By the 19th century, Dublin was changing, and many grand houses began to lose their original purpose. After 1800, the Irish Parliament no longer existed due to the Act of Union. Decisions about Ireland would now be made in London, not Dublin, and many politicians didn't feel like there was any need for a residence in the town anymore. In 1820, the house was converted into a lawyer's office, and the street was then described as having the air of a legal university. In 1863, the house was taken over by the Dublin militia, and the house was turned into a barracks. The soldiers moved in with their wives and children, and the street became a noisy and riotous place. In 1876, a complaint was made by local lawyers still living in the adjacent homes, and the house yet again fell silent and empty. Then in 1877, the house entered a completely different chapter. A landlord named Thomas Vance converted the house into tenements. Initially, the homes were advertised as being a cut above your average tenement, the landlord going as far as to install toilets and running water on each floor for the residents to share. The grand staircase was removed and the rooms were divided. And the building, once intended for a single wealthy family, became home to many working households. The change was dramatic, but it wasn't unique across Dublin. All over the city, large Georgian houses were being reshaped to meet the housing needs for a growing urban population. Before stepping into the tenement years, I'll share something personal. Coming here from Birmingham, a city with such strong Irish connections and community. Many of us in the city grew up surrounded by Irish neighbours, friends and families. So walking into these rooms felt less like somewhere unfamiliar and more like stepping into a shared story from across the water that I'd listened to firsthand from friends and neighbours. And maybe that's why I found myself drawn not just to the big historical moments, but to the everyday lives that lived inside these walls. By 1911, more than 100 people were living inside number 14. There were more than 850 people across 19 buildings. Census records show a mix of trades and occupations: dressmakers, labourers, bookbinders, and families raising children in tight quarters. Just the one room might serve as a kitchen, bedroom, and sitting room all at once. Furniture had to work hard: a table for meals, beds tucked into corners, belongings carefully arranged to make the most of limited space. Families here worked hard to keep their own space clean, but the cramped nature of these homes meant that disease spread quickly. Dublin had the highest infant mortality rate in the British Isles every year between 1899 and 1913. The families here were large, and it was not unusual for whole families of up to 13 people or more to share a single room space within this house. I kept trying to imagine how it must have sounded. It must have been so noisy, how it smelt and how it felt to be here as I walked through. The facilities here were shared. A single water source and only a small number of toilets served the entire building. Because of large queues or access, many families relied on chamber pots. And an everyday routine included the task of slopping out. That's bringing down your waste in a chamber pot and disposing of it. These small domestic realities can feel stark to us now, but they were simply part of daily life for many urban families at the time. Food was simple and needed to be easy to cook: potatoes, bread, and sometimes bacon. Walking through the house today, you can still see traces of those lives. Layers of paint in the hallways, raddle red and Reckitt's blue, hint at attempts to brighten damp spaces. These colours are known as the colour scheme in communal areas in the Dublin tenements. There are still handwritten notices on the walls found during the restoration. Reminders of people trying to communicate with neighbours in a busy shared building. Some accounts even mention visitors or vagrants sleeping in the corridors from time to time, reflecting the open-door nature of tenement life, where boundaries between private and shared spaces were often blurred. It would be really easy for me to tell the story of this house only through hardship, but what stood out for me just as much is community. Oral histories speak of neighbours helping one another, children playing together, having fun, getting up to mischief, and doors left open during the day. Families marked birthdays, shared food, and created routines that turned a crowded room into a home. These were lives shaped by resilience and not defined by a single narrative, but by countless ordinary moments. There are so many stories in these walls calling out to you to learn more and more. I came away quite overwhelmed by these voices, and also I would love to learn more now about the history of Ireland. The tenements you see here are recreations of real homes, guided by their original residents. Decades of overcrowding and neglect in buildings like this led to several cases of tenement buildings collapsing in Dublin. In 1902, 1909 and 1911, collapses of buildings like this led to fatalities. And in 1913, 2 buildings collapsed on Church Street, killing 7 people, including 2 babies. Finally, public outrage led to an official inquiry. It was found that 20,000 families were living in one-room tenement flats, with a number of these being deemed unfit for human habitation. The report called for the building of 14,000 new houses. But then came the First World War. It was not until the 1920s and 1930s, and after the Irish War of Independence, when in 1922 Ireland was a free state again, that new housing began to be constructed. Although some families moved into newly built flats and houses, these tenements in Henrietta Street were occupied until the 1970s. When you look out of the windows at Henrietta Street, you can see some of these new homes. An Art Deco style public housing development of hope. I'll show you some of that footage at the end of the video. But the residents of this tenement would have been looking out over this new housing, and I wonder what they thought. Many families who moved out of the tenements actually struggled. They missed the community, their friends, and an old way of life. Tough as it was, these tenements were their home. In 1970, there were still 6 families amounting to 29 people living here inside Henrietta Street. The last apartment you see is a true reconstruction of one of the last flats here, which you can imagine I loved. Many people still visit this apartment and remember their own lives in spaces like this. The last resident moved out of Henrietta Street in 1979 and the tenement was finally closed. Walking through the building feels like moving through layers of time, from elegant but empty Georgian rooms where you get an idea of space, to tenement flats. Each space tells the wider story about Dublin and the people who shaped it. And perhaps what makes 14 Henrietta Street so powerful is that it holds all these stories together. Rich, poor, struggle, change, continuity, ordinary lives lived within extraordinary walls. Standing here at the end of my visit, I think it's important to be honest with you because that's how I do things here, and people who subscribe to the channel know that. The history inside this building is incredibly important, and I'm genuinely glad I came to Dublin. Hearing about the families who lived here and seeing how one grand house became a community space really stayed with me. But if I'm truthful, the guided tour itself wasn't quite my style. I tend to like exploring history slowly and forming my own thoughts as I go. And this experience felt heavier than I expected at times. It probably didn't help that I was incredibly tired, and that always makes me hypersensitive and emotional. That doesn't take away from the significance of the museum or the work that's gone into preserving these stories. It's an amazing place curated by passionate people. It just means that sometimes, on some days, we all connect with history in different ways. What I will carry with me from this visit are the everyday details, the handwritten messages on the walls, the sense of neighbours having each other's back, living side by side, probably getting on each other's nerves. This house has witnessed centuries of change without ever losing its connection to ordinary people. For me, that's where the real strength of 14 Henrietta Street lies. Not in a single narrative, but in the many lives, the hundreds of lives that unfolded here. If you do visit, and I urge you to come, visit with curiosity and take with it what speaks to you. And as always, I love to hear from you in the comments about what you think. Did any of you grow up in a tenement in Dublin? I'd love to hear from you. We have such a beautiful community here, and I don't take that for granted. As always, thank you for watching. And before I go, letting you know that I've actually set up a website for Through Lucy's Lens. Finally! I'm going to be writing articles, sharing thoughts, and setting up a map of all the places I visit as a handy social history guide for you and other lovers of history across the world. I'll pop the link into the description, and I've also got a proper email address now, so you can, by all means, drop by to say hello. As always, thank you so much for being here. And if you're not subscribed yet, it really does help me continue to tell the story of everyday people. It's my passion, and I'm so happy you're here. See you next time. Goodbye.